continues its operation. We're having a very important event today. We will be talking about cooperation between European Union and the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources of Ukraine. And I want to introduce our speakers today. Is the Commissioner of European Union for Environment, Oceans and Fisheries, Virginius Sinkavičius. And our second speaker is the Minister of Environment and Natural Resources of Ukraine, Ruslan Strilets. Mr. Commissioner, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, and still good morning to everyone. I'm pleased to be in Kiev, pleased to be in Ukraine. It's my fourth time since the Russia's invasion, and I'm very happy with our tight friendship and cooperation with Minister Strilets and Ukrainian administration, Ukrainian government. I think we have went a long way. I can only say that we've been working a lot on methodology of how to ensure and encount the Russian war crimes, not only against Ukrainian people, against infrastructure, but also against nature, because we strongly think that Russia has to be accountable for all the war crimes that they have done on Ukrainian land. We also managed to finalize very swiftly, and Ukraine become first non-EU member to join European Union's LIFE program, for environment and climate projects. And of course, we now working on concrete projects to be implemented. We will put a huge focus, first of all, on waste management and water facilities. This is also the objects that are becoming a big issue with the war still raging in Ukraine. As we all know, Russian terrorism, systemic terrorism against Ukrainian people aims into water facility treatments, into energy objects, and of course they need immediate help so that pollution does not spread and people are not left without resources like water and heating in the middle of winter. Now, the main purpose of this visit is, I would say, threefold. We have three messages. First of all, it's of course green recovery of Ukraine. We've been talking about it a lot, but finally we can talk about the concrete project, our project called Phoenix, where we dedicated 7 million, sorry, I wish it would be 7 billion, 7 million for a capacity building with Ukrainian cities to ensure that we plan this green recovery, because at the end of the day, how recovery of Ukraine will look, it will depend on design and planning. So we will be working very closely between EU and Ukraine architects to ensure a sustainable planning of especially those public buildings, which we can have, I think, a typical energy efficient modern projects for schools, kindergartens, hospitals, and ensure that then of course they are multiplied with concrete costs across the municipalities. Then we will be working, of course, very closely with the municipalities to ensure that the planning stage is done and that recovery is prepared, so we are not stuck in some sort of bureaucracy. And third, of course, green public procurement. Even in the EU, sometimes it becomes a big issue. There is always a willingness about, greening, more energy efficient solutions, but the difficulty is public procurements. So we'll try to work very closely between our experts to ensure that we build the capacities of municipalities that they can swiftly embark on this journey. Secondly, is of course EU's and Ukraine's accession to EU. We are working very closely with the ministry, and I'm very thankful to Minister Strilets for his work that has been done. In the current review, those huge reforms, around 5 reforms, especially I have to praise waste management reform. They are still not evaluated. They will be evaluated in the next review, but there has been a huge work done. Still, a lot of work remains to be done, and we will be working closely on also ensuring on constant exchange and direct work between DG Environment and Ministry of Environment. What's very important is to understand that these reforms that are needed, they are not only focused to the Ministry of Environment. Sometimes it's a horizontal reform. So of course, each ministry which especially works on harmonization of European Union acquis legislation needs a horizontal support and whole government approach. And the third message, the positive, I would say one, yesterday we started our visit in Zhytomyr region, where we discussed our common objective of planting more trees. So the EU has a goal of 3 billion trees. Ukraine has a objective of 1 billion trees. So we decided to unite this in the face of war and make it 4 billion trees initiative. We will now work on a common platform which will be accessible and available in Ukraine and in EU, in of course all available languages, to ensure that despite the raging war and of course huge plots of land and forests that are going to be wiped out due to Russian terrorism, we will still continue our efforts of afforestation, and we will ensure that by 2030 we together plant 4 billion or even more trees, and hopefully that will be also a great gift for the future generations. I'll stop here. There is much more to say, but I guess I will be able to answer your questions on maybe more concrete projects. We will still continue today with our meetings and discussions. I had an opportunity to meet Vice Prime Minister Kubrakov on restoration efforts. We are meeting mayors of Kiev region today. We have met civil society. It was a huge meeting with over 20 of participants from civil society. Once again, I'm very happy to be here, and to reconfirm that European Union, myself personally, we will stand besides Ukraine until the victory, and then of course years and years afterwards, ensuring that we rebuild the beauty of Ukraine. Thank you.
Дякую, пане Руслане.
Доброго дня.
Thank you, Mr. Ruslan. Good morning. First of all, I want to greet again our dear friend Virginius Sinkavicius, and this is the European Commissioner who, in my opinion, pays most attention to Ukrainian environment, and we value that. We have certain results already. What was told already by Mr. Commissioner today about the initiatives are very concrete things that we can start building today on the fundamental level. Regarding the green rebuilding, we understand that cross-sectoral nature of those initiatives and the initiative Phoenix that Mr. Commissioner mentioned, it's something that is understood in what should be done for Ukraine. We should unify the approaches, unify them from point of view of minimization of the impact on environment. And we continue the European integration movement, and I value a lot that we will have this opportunity to work not only on ourselves, but to work with the relevant European Commission Directorate, because only those people who went this serious way, only those experts can give us the good advice. In year 2022, together with the deputies of Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, we approved 7 important European integration laws. It's a very important step during the war, but today we have not only to speak about the adoption of those laws, but on the implementation of the standards to make those laws work. It's a difficult way, and we understand clearly where we move. And talking about the waste management reform that Mr. Commissioner tells about, in the end of 2022, we presented the roadmap, how this reform would move. We need about 1 year for this, and in fact, it's been 3 months already that we work on it. And in communication with such experts, we can count on recognition of those steps which would be taken in the future. I understand that year 2023 will be very important because we have a number of initiatives, but during the first short-term phase, we will jointly with the European Union verify the roadmap as to the actions required to continue our European integration course in the field of environmental protection and move in that direction further on. I value the fact that we can unify the initiative of Volodymyr Zelensky, the green country, which says about the 1 billion trees, and that European Commissioner is ready to unite it with the European Commission program about the 3 billion trees with the European 1 billion trees, means that we are already integrated, and it means Ukraine not only can be a member, but Ukraine can contribute its indicators for the sustainable development in the future. And another issue I want to raise is the calculation of losses resulting from war. We worked on that issue with the European Commission, but today we're having new challenges, and we discussed the matters. The situation was going on in the Kakhovsky water reservoir. The reduction of water level has negative results already, and we understand the risks in the future. I'm convinced that Mr. Commissioner will help us bring that issue up to the international level to condemn the aggressor for their actions when they reduce the level of water just for their use. It may have tremendous consequences, because if the normal level of Kakhovsky water reservoir is 16 meters, today the level is 13.83 meters. In future, it may result in more than a million Ukrainians left without potable water, and the water level below 12 meters will result in environmental catastrophe, because we may lose a lot of biodiversity. I'm talking about the fish and the changes in biodiversity of other species, and I'm convinced that only with the support of our friends, our international partners, we may bring this issue up to the international level. And such actions of Russia, in fact, are another attempt of nuclear terrorism, because they may pose threat to the cooling of the reactors of Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. So I call all of our international partners on the highest level to communicate that issue, that Russia continues their nuclear terrorism, they never stop, and we have to take all steps possible to make them stop. Thank you, dear colleagues. You may ask your questions from Mr. Minister and Mr. Commissioner. Please have the mic. Good morning, Interfax Ukraine, Elena Manjela. There was information that European Union calls Ukraine to continue the efforts for the continuation of decarbonization, and how the Ukraine sees decarbonization during the war. It's probably a question to Mr. Minister, and I will have more questions. Thank you very much for your question. This issue is not paused. We keep working on the draft law, which would allow us not only to build the system of monitoring and evaluation of carbon emissions. This program works already. More than 1,000 installations are already registered, but to build the proper system for trade of quotes. We have to verify them, how to account them. And the first year of the operation of this system, it works since 1st of January 2022. We had to register the installations and to start receiving reports in 2023. They were suspended, this process, but we continue working. So we want by the end of 2023 to crystallize this process to the maximum extent. As to the decarbonization in total, the same billion trees and 3 billion trees by the EU. Those are the another steps for decarbonization of our environment. The reduction of the impact of the CO2 emissions. The movement is still on. We have to set the terms to when we should achieve certain goals, and we will work with the relevant EU directorate. And another question as to Kakhovsky water reservoir. What can our partners do in the top level? What solutions are you expect from them to influence on that situation? And about allocation of 7 million, are they dollars, and who allocates them and for what programs? That would be the question to Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you for your question. So first of all, this issue with Rivne, we just discussed with Minister, and we will of course raise it in at the international level. It's definitely a question of UN, but this is a clear of another act of terrorism against people and against their basic needs, which has to be also well documented. Of course, it's extremely important to raise the awareness of what consequences if the further decline of water level will continue, what consequences it might bear, and then of course ensure that this message also gets to Moscow, and that they revert from at least these actions, which can be avoided, of course. Now on 7 million euros, so this is two programs. It's a program Life and Horizon Cities program. We hope to open already the call for the applications in April, and then to finalize the process by December, where we could have already a municipalities, a civil society organizations participating in our capacity building exercises and dialogues.
Дякую вам, шановні колеги. Чи є ще питання? Прошу.
Are there any more questions on the floor? If so, please go inform.
Igor Brilyan, I'm Inform. So I have a question to Eurocommissar. There is a huge impact of war on natural reserve system, and for example, in Zhytomyr region there is Drevlyansky natural reserve located. Also, Chernobyl reserve was deoccupied at the beginning of April last year. And how the EU could support Ukraine with these challenges? There are deforestation due to war and other questions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for your question. And as I've mentioned, we're working very closely with Ministry. I think we have to have a clear line here. On one hand, what's very clear that of course EU will look for all possible means to help Ukraine as regards we're uniting our afforestation efforts, 3 billion and 1 billion trees, to make one initiative to ensure that, for example, we can speed up afforestation efforts, especially in those regions that now are not suffering from active war activities. Nevertheless, what is crucial is accountability of environmental damage that has been done. So far, the latest information that it's already over 42 billion, and of course the price tag is growing, and Russia has to be accountable and has to pay the price. because otherwise we cannot be naive that European Union, G7 countries or any other funds will be able to, you know, to fully help Ukraine. I think what's extremely important is justice. And of course, justice for a war crimes that has been done against the Ukrainian society, against Ukrainian people, but also Ukrainian environment. Because all those issues that you have named in your questions, the bombing of water management facilities, bombing of chemical industrial plants, that all leaves pollution, which will remain in Ukraine for many, many years to come. And of course, all that has to be accounted, and all that has to be part of the war crime prosecution against Russia and against their war crimes that they have done. But we will continue to work. I think it's important in these uneasy times to have also positive messages. That's why from the very beginning, when we've met with Ruslan, we started to think of what sort of projects we could implement on the ground. That's how, you know, Ukrainians' way and very swift acceptance to life program has been born, where Ukraine is a member and doesn't have any costs to be part of life, but has a full access to program. And I truly hope that we will be implementing real projects on the ground very soon. That's how Project Phoenix has been born, and many other initiatives. I can only remind that the current EU help for Ukraine is already around 57 billion, and that's not, of course, going to stop here. We will continue supporting Ukraine in all possible means, but we never should forget who is responsible for all the damage and suffering that Ukraine has to face today.
Друзі, чи є ще питання? Є, прошу.
If there are any more questions on the floor, please go ahead. Daniel Snisser, United News Marathon. The question is how Ukraine complies with its European integration obligations, and in what part, for example, there is a lot of work to be done, and in what part Ukraine has made it better.
Shall I? Thank you very much for your question. I have a personal admiration to Ukrainian administration, because despite the war, tremendous work has been done. Only, you know, I work directly with the Ministry of Environment. In the end of last year, the full adoption of at least 5 very complex reforms. Usually when we talk about the environmental acts, it's a very complex reforms, and usually they are very difficult to pass through the parliament. But also we have a decisions in the parliament, which is very important. There is still work to be done. A rule of law, anti-corruption law, full implementation. Even on environmental part, there is still of bit work to be done. Finalization of Emerald network, for example, or you know, small other bits. But to be honest, looking at you know, the 7 conditions, Ukraine been progressing extremely well, and being very well focused on implementation of them. And I think everyone sees that progress and efforts done to move ahead. What's very important is not only ticking the box; it's also implementing on the ground, and that, of course, in times of war is very difficult. We of course see that, but that's also an important part.
Пан міністр.
Дуже дякую за запитання.
Thank you very much for your question. I can only say about the environmental policy, I cannot give the general evaluation, but in year 2022 we adopted 7 important European integration laws in the area of environmental protection. No fundamental processes were started within the whole history of independence, and what Mr. Commissioner said, it's important to really implement them. Just one example we covered today is the principle of circular economy. It's not enough to adopt the law but also we have to fulfill the roadmap, and it's a very complicated way to make the circular economy work. We have to have the crystallized plan how it should work. If we already make a foundation of some rules, we have to make sure that those rules are complied with, and it's already the cross-sectoral nature, bringing to liability, social responsibility, and so on and so forth. We work on this issue 24/7 on our end, and I'm convinced that the work which would be done in 2023 in evaluation of our results for 2022-2023 will be way more important than that evaluation, that assessment which we have in this transitional stage. And I want to thank Mr. Commissioner once again that we would not be left alone in this way, but we will be supported by the experts, by the specialists who walked that difficult way. Dear friends, do we have any more questions on the floor? So if there are no more questions, I want to thank our journalists for their interest to this utmostly important subject. I want to thank Mr. Commissioner for systemic support of our country. Thank you. And we continue working on our victory, trust in our armed forces, and glory to Ukraine.